You're listening to the Homeownership podcast by Momentum Realty, real estate talk for buying, selling, and owning property.
Hey guys, Sean Patrick Maloney here, broker owner of Momentum Realty, located in Hanover, Massachusetts. Welcome to episode 13, Understanding Appraisals for Buyers and Sellers. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Maloney. Thanks for joining me this week. In a very hot market like we have currently, one of the things that comes into play is home appraisals and the value that is determined by them. Every seller in the world right now wants to get top dollar for their home, which is great. And every agent in the world right now wants to get you top dollar because we get paid commissions, so our sales go through and we make more money if we get you more money. One of the risks behind this whole thing is that we're doing what's called leading the market, which is where each price is higher than the last price that was out there. And the risk behind that is that the appraisal doesn't come in and doesn't go for the same value as the house was sold. So let's rewind for a second and talk about how we got here. So when we have a market like we do currently, where we're in a pretty strong market, basically a seller's market currently, you have agents out there looking for listings, and there's not many listings coming on. There's extreme competition for them. There's more agents than ever, and there's less listings than ever, which means that agents are more and more aggressive because, let's be honest, when a seller meets with an agent, most of the time they try to choose whoever tells them that they can get the highest price. That method of decision making actually is kind of silly because sometimes it can lead to a bad appraisal. But again, we'll talk about that in just a bit. When you have that competition level where you have many, many different agents trying to work for the same listings, what it can lead to is people doing what we call buying a listing. Buying a listing is when an agent simply tells the seller a number that they know they want to hear, even though they know it will never sell for that price or they don't think it will sell for that price. The risk involved, though, again, is that someone comes in and pays that price, and knowing that the price was too high, we can end up in a situation. The other thing that comes into play often when you have this heightened market is you get into situations with buyers where we're all out there trying to make multiple offers. So we're out there writing offers up on the first open house or on the first thing due by Monday, and what ends up happening is people bid more than the asking price, and sometimes dramatically more than the asking price, especially in the cities. Right now in Boston area, in the greater metro of Boston, there's a lot of houses going for almost as much as 5 to 7% over asking price, which means that we're pushing the price up even higher and increasing the risk. So with that said, most buyers currently are using what we call an appraisal clause. An appraisal clause just simply states within the offer that the property must appraise at or above purchase price. What this acts as a protection for you, the buyer, in order to make sure that the appraisal comes in at the right price. If it doesn't come in at what you paid for it, it allows you the right to renegotiate or to walk away from the deal. Most commonly, renegotiation happens, and most commonly, both parties end up meeting in the middle during that type of situation. Without an appraisal clause, if you have a mortgage contingency in, a lot of times a mortgage contingency which says that the purchase of the home is contingent, meaning it's based on the fact that you need to get a home loan. The fact of needing to get that home loan a lot of times will disqualify you if the fact of the appraisal goes in and the appraised price is way lower than what you were paying for it. The other risk, though, is if you're a high cash down buyer and you're doing more than 20% down and you don't really need the appraisal, the bank could not deny the loan, which then you don't have a way out and means that you just have to pay that extra money in cash between what the loan value is and what you're borrowing. It's not the worst thing ever going to pay more, especially in a climbing market. It really depends on the matter of how you feel, the client buying the home. I can tell you one of the funniest things that goes on as a real estate agent working in this marketplace is everybody's all, oh, let's bid up. Oh my God, I need to give them more. I want to get this house. And then 3-4 weeks pass by, they already got the house locked up, and the appraisal comes in, and suddenly they're like, I paid way too much for this house. I don't understand why you'd let me do this. And a lot of times it comes down to people wanting to get a house and being stressed out about the fact that the market is so competitive that they bid so high, and then they kind of get buyer's remorse when they find out that they, quote, paid too much. But I always go back to the old analogy when somebody has a baseball card and they say, hey, this baseball card's worth $500 because this little magazine here called a Beckett tells me that that's what it's worth. the end of the day, nothing is worth anything except for what someone is willing to pay for it. So the fact of the matter that you actually made an offer for that price and you're willing to pay that makes the home worth that value. And funny enough, once you close on that house, your house, even though it didn't appraise out and you ended up paying more than the appraiser thought, the next time he does an appraisal or she does an appraisal in that neighborhood, they can actually use your comp, even though they said that that was not a good appraisal price. So that shows you that it's actual true value because you are going to raise the price in the neighborhood by closing on that house. So a lot of times what it is the banks don't want to take on the extra assumed risk. They don't want you as a client, if you got foreclosed on in the next few months, or if the market, did end up taking a slope down, they don't want to own the house for too much. But like I said, it's funny that they're able to use that as a comp right after. Let's pause for a second and talk a little bit about condominiums. Condominiums is one where a lot of people get confused, both buyers and sellers. This is one you want to listen in on. A condominium complex can only be compared to units within the same condominium complex. So a lot of times you have people in condos saying, well, I see this one, it's sold for a lot more than mine. Well, it's not in your complex. And I know this seems unfair, but you're directly compared to the ones in your complex. When you're in a lot of these bigger complexes that end up with foreclosures and things like that, and it can really actually hurt your value. Like always, when you own a condo, buyer or a seller, the one thing you always want to remember is, unlike a single family home, you're relying on the financial security of others, you're relying on the financial best judgment of others, as well as you're relying on the management of other people with your money as far as overall condo budgets and things like that. So as far as appraisals go, though, remember that appraisals are only within your building. Sometimes you might get lucky and they might push it a little bit for you. I actually recently sold my mother's home about a year ago, a little more than that, in a condo, and we had a heck of a time selling the place overall. We got offers right away, but the place wasn't VA approved. We ended up getting that done. The appraisal was a little bit off. We ended up getting that fixed up. And it was just all due to the fact that condo versus single family, things work differently. So I'll do another episode in the future about the differences between condos and single family home sales. But for now, just think, if you're doing an appraisal, you need to look within your own condominium complex, which means that you can't drastically increase the price by doing repairs or doing upgrades to the home. So always be careful about over upgrading the home, because granite countertops, yes, they'll add a little bit of money on the overall appraisal when they do the cost to build approach or other things like that, but most likely they're not going to look too far into that, and you can end up kind of eating those extra expenses and not being able to get the money back. So let's go back to, what if the appraisal does not come in at value? So there's a couple of things that can go on. One of the most common ones is just a renegotiation. Both the buyer and the seller try to figure out how to get it done. A lot of the times, I'm going to be honest with you right now, buyers do not have a lot of cash. We're in a world of 3.5% down home loans, and we're in a world of lots of people paying PMI and having no issue with it. So that means when you miss the appraisal, and normally what can happen if the person has the cash is they can buy the difference between the two, meaning if the house was supposed to come in at $400 and it came in at $390, there's $10,000 that misses, which considers their down payment to be $10,000 less, which means some money has to be come up with. And a lot of times back in the day, the buyer or the seller would pay it. Now, because of the fact that we have low cash down buyers, a lot of the times it's on the seller, and what it means is a price reduction. This is a time where you need to think about the fact that, hey, just going with an agent based on the fact that they gave you the top total price may not be the best suggestion. At the end of the day, we always have to use education. We always have to use what the market has indicated that we can sell for. That way we're not way late in the game making a price break. Because if you think you're just going to bump the person out and you're just going to get it done with someone else, well, guess what? The appraisal already came in low. You already know it's not going to appraise out, and it just means you're going to get to the end line with someone else and have it fall apart. If you feel like the appraisal was off, like sometimes they'll send an appraiser from way out of town, from a different area. You might get a Fall River appraiser over in Duxbury, or you might get, a guy from over in, say, Dorchester area, and he goes into South Boston. Places that have extremely different values, sometimes they don't seem to have the understanding of the localized value. So every once in a while you'll have a buyer or a seller buy a second opinion appraisal. And yes, I said buyer or seller because sometimes a buyer's adamant they want the place. It's just that they can't get it done because they don't have the money, they don't have the cash, and the seller's not willing to make the difference up, and the seller just simply says, hey, if you don't give me that money, I'm not going to bother selling the house. I'm just going to take it off the market. So the second chance appraisal It's risky because at the end of the day, it might be another $400 to $600, maybe even more depending on the size of the home, that ends up just kind of going out the window, because at the end of the day, if the second appraisal misses, there's really not much you can do. With the VA home loans, there is a little bit of wiggle room. They do have something where you're able to submit in information to the appraiser within a certain amount of time, where you can try to influence them a little bit. Maybe they missed a comp, or maybe they missed some other thing. Always when you miss an appraisal, push your agent, make sure your agent's out there working for you. Sometimes we are able to influence the appraiser a little bit, but due to the fact of the conflict of interest, as you can tell, a lot of times the appraisers simply don't really want our input. I have had times where I have sent them my comps and, magically they don't agree that I made a change to it, but somehow the number changed. Last but not least, in appraisals, when it comes to what else can be done, sometimes it's really just going to take the agents themselves, and this isn't very common, but if it only misses by a little bit, you may have two agents on both sides that stand on a big ticket home sale. They may stand to gain a lot of money, and they might kick in a tiny bit of money as well to make it happen. So I think always with real estate, there's so many parties that are involved that are looking to make it happen. Mortgage brokers, real estate agents, the buyer, the seller. There's always a way. The big thing to remember as a home seller or buyer is just don't let emotion get involved. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business transaction. And when you're sitting on one side of the table and you're saying it's only $500, no matter when you use the word it's only in both directions. So you need to think, if you start on that it's only thing and you start feeling that way, it's going to deteriorate relations. So when you deteriorate relations, you're going to deteriorate the deal. You can't be sitting there thinking, oh, this person's crazy and ridiculous. They need that extra money. I don't understand why. As a buyer, it's actually, and I'm going to voice my opinion here on this, I kind of find it crazy. The buyer just offered that much money, and then they're mad at the home seller for wanting the money that was offered to them that they took it off the market for. Especially when it's a multiple offer thing and they went over asking price and someone offered them that, and then they're trying to use the appraisal as a way to whittle down the price. I kind of find it crazy. I understand sometimes cash-wise it can't happen. I understand sometimes it needs to be the other way. But when a person has the available cash and they're just simply trying to beat up the seller, even though they took the home off the market for them in a multiple offer situation, I just find that to be a little bit off-putting. And it's a little bit tough. As an agent, we always are a fiduciary for our clients. So we always have to represent their best interest and what they want. So sometimes as an agent, I'm put in a situation where I got to make a phone call that I'm cringy about because I don't even feel like I really want to ask for the money back. But at the end of the day, I do my job. I get in there and I get it done. I had one appraisal recently where we had to do a little bit of wiggling around as far as getting it down, and I thought it was fair. We were able to make amends with both parties, and they met in the middle, which I thought that was really good. I thought, a seller and a buyer that can agree upon the fact that we didn't know that the price was a little bit high on the home, and when it came in wrong, we both really want to accomplish the same thing. You want to sell the home. I want to buy the home. You don't want to hit it back on the market, and I really don't want to go back out and shop again. So why don't we just agree that we'll meet in the middle? And ultimately, in all business transactions, both parties have to leave feeling satisfied in order for it to be a good transaction. Anytime you leave with one feeling a gripe or the other one feeling a gripe, it can be a tough situation. And as a real estate agent, I can tell you, leaving these situations in bad terms is kind of tough. It's far better when you leave a closing table with a handshake and here's my phone number in case you ever need anything while you're in my new home that you just bought off me, and that type of thing, because in the long run, human relations, it's really difficult when you run into that question about the home as a new homeowner and you can't call the person who last owned the home who could tell you, and then you're going to spend thousands of dollars with contractors trying to figure out something that they could have simply told you that's just how it goes, or you wiggle it this way, or you hit the switch that's behind the refrigerator I forgot to tell you about. Every home comes with its nuances, and it's always good to have both parties in agreement on those things. So again, on home appraisal, the big thing to remember, especially in the upward climbing marketplace, is properly pricing homes at the beginning, and also knowing when getting multiple offers and looking at situations as a seller. If you see that home appraisal contingency in there and you see another offer that doesn't and is a high cash down offer but is a lower offer, you may want to accept that lower offer because you know you're going to miss on the appraisal, and you know the other person can't come up with the money, and you know you're facing an appraisal contingency. So making an educated decision on accepting an offer sometimes is difficult because as a seller, we're always looking at top dollar and we're not looking at the other terms. But we always want to make sure that we are educated in the fact that the decision-making process is a big thing. The last thing I want to go over today about appraisals is there's many different types of financing. There's conventional financing, there's portfolio lending, there's FHA, there's VA, and realizing that each one comes with a different style appraisal. And what I mean by a different style appraisal is their willingness to accept differences in the home. Portfolio lending by far is going to be your least stringent, with VA and FHA being your most stringent. So as a home seller or a home buyer, you need to think about this. A lot of home buyers categorize themselves into FHA loans because they think I'm only putting 3.5% down. That's all I can possibly get. You're certainly not going to get a portfolio lend at 3.5% down. Those usually start around 10.1% and above down. But what you can do is conventional lending at 3.5% down, which will actually strengthen your offer, because when home sellers are looking at FHA, VA, or any other government-backed loan, the one thing that they know is the appraisal is a little more particular about things like peeling paint and the fact that the mechanicals in the home need to work, and sometimes they can just be a little more stringent on other things. So there's a whole list of items that they're going to look at. You can definitely grab that right online, look that up. But overall, when you're accepting offers, VA, FHA, you really don't want to discriminate based on it, but you do want to use an educated mind of the fact that you know where your home's at. And if it is a big deal, like if you do have a ton of peeling paint, if you hit that home appraisal and it goes bad, who's going to pay for it? Are you willing to do it and paint the little bit that needs to be painted, or are you going to get in a big argument about it? Those are things you want to think about ahead of time so that you're not running into them at the end line. When you do run into things like a peeling paint situation on the FHA or VA, they're not saying that you need to paint the Sistine Chapel and that it needs to be absolutely beautiful. All they're saying is that you must peel any of the peeling paint off and then seal it over by painting with a fresh layer. You don't even need to take down the rough edges. You simply just need to peel off the peeling paint and throw some more paint on. It can even be spot painting. You don't have to paint the entire thing. It's just that they don't allow that peeling paint. So remember again, when you're looking at these and you're about to go into the process of accepting an offer, you need to accept an offer that you know will actually appraise out. The word appraisal is far different than the word assessment, as well as comparative market analysis, as well as broker opinion of value. Appraisal is the one that matters when it comes to the loan. Appraisal is the one that's going to get the bank to say to you, that's a fair lend. I'm willing to give you the money. You can buy that home with my money, and you can pay me back as you do through your mortgage payments. So if you have any questions about appraisals or you're looking to buy or sell a home, feel free to reach out to us directly. Feel free to email me, call me, text me. I look forward to talking to you next week, and thanks for joining. Make sure to follow the podcast.